inequality, which I think is the biggest question on the economic scene.
Yes, I do actually have that as one of the things I'll be talking about as I go in for values. What do we have? Values debate, challenging philosophical underpinnings of whether growth and prosperity is good, and that does actually feed into negative GDP, waste. No. I do believe I have it here, I hope so. But yes, inequality. I can see it. It's on page 7, 8, and we're currently on page 7.
So
coming up soon.
Susan, do you have a question before you then?
No, we thought it finished at 5 and my daughter's coming home, so I'm just
Well, thank
anxious.
you very much for
But
coming.
it was very
I
nice
hope you
to
found
come.
it interesting.
We did, and we'd like to come on Wednesday as well, if that's all right.
So
The
Fred,
Wednesday, that will
Yes.
be, yes. that
Anyone
ends
can
on
come on
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Who knows, maybe I'll give a repeat of this on a Wednesday.
Yes.
So sorry, I don't like
We
to
will
be
have
rude.
other things, so if you're on the meet
I
up,
thought it
keep
was
in
from
touch.
4
Lovely to
but
meet you.
maybe-
Okay, I do
Thank
remember,
you.
sad to say, there was someone who was annoyed that it was announced starting at 4 and it actually started at 4:30. I think we lost him.
Yes, yes, I wonder what happened.
thank you. He made an insulting remark as he went down the road,
Did he?
but he had not read his viewpoints, had he?
He's not a member.
Yeah, he came through meetup, so you know.
Oh, okay, well, you'll have to,
You just say an insulting remark. What was
yes.
that? Who was that?
Doesn't matter.
Well, as long as it didn't come
Ask
from
her
me.
over supper.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
So I'll have to put 4 for 4:30 on meetup.
Yes,
Okay.
alright.
All right, I've learnt that. Okay, so far you don't have a question?
Oh, not a question, I just remark that I often, if I'm looking for a particular product and I see it really advertised, one particular one advertised really heavily, I'm thinking, well, how much of what I pay for is paying for that rubbish? So I'll go and buy one that doesn't advertise.
Yes, I know how you feel. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'll leave you off because you're...
Yeah, no problem.
Fred?
Yeah, I think we should keep in mind your difference between normative and descriptive.
Yes. Well, I am saying that there's a lot of normative stuff that creeps into a lot of economic debate, and I guess I am identifying that and talking about a lot of these normative undercurrents, shall we say. So yes.
If we had slavery today, an economist could still talk about it and study it and everything without saying whether it's right or wrong. Just the economics of slavery could write a book about it.
That would be descriptive or positive economics of
That's
slavery,
right.
describing it as an institution, yes.
Okay, Jill.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking about the ancient Romans. I'm sure you, and the, economics and the ancient Greeks. Rather, we'll go on and on. And I was thinking, I'm reading on ancient Rome, where they organised those amazing Senate, the committee. Oh, look, we won't go into it, but it was supposed to have been, I would say, from reading what I have read, it was the start of capitalism, because they were very, very greedy, and then they started grabbing the land, putting into the hands of the rich. That's too simplified. And the other thing is, do you like George Maynard Keynes like I do?
Keynes.
Keynes.
Oh yes, what did he had
Do you
some
think
cute-
do you think it's the? Do you think he's the best? I'd love to know.
I think Keynes missed out on complexity economics and behavioural economics, which are two interesting things that have come up. But I think he made some very cute remark, which a lot of people remember. If the facts change, what do you do? I change my mind, sir, or something like that. You know? If the facts change, what do you do, sir? I change my mind. What do you do? Some people may remember that. And the other thing that Keynes also did, there was stuff where he was starting to get at human psychology as a fundamental input to economic analysis, where he talked about animal spirits. Right? That is trying to say the undefinable psychological human element that is the hidden input into all these things. And obviously I'm getting ahead of myself here, but you do have the interesting situation where in terms of inflation, inflationary expectations are almost as important as the measurement of inflation itself. In other words, we're going away from an objective measurement to saying, well, it's the way people relate to this situation that's very important. So you're actually feeding in some of these animal spirits into that. And this thing of animal spirits obviously was developed a bit more with behavioural economics, but there were some interesting things that Keynes said. Now, he was actually talking about injection and pumping money into the system. And I do think that the idea that you can just run the printing presses and somehow turn things around, I mean, much as I'm a lefty, even I don't relate well to that notion, and you wonder if Keynes was actually saying that. Maybe you know more about Keynes than me, but he was obviously said some very interesting things in his time. So there you go.
Thank you, John.
Victor? Did you have a question?
Well, I guess the trouble is because the talk's been divided up. I'm sort of a bit hesitant to ask certain questions. But is there any consideration in your talk about the assumptions that have changed over the time, say, for example, Adam Smith, and you know, he talked about this, the leave it to the candlestick maker and so forth, which some modern neoliberal economists still sort of go along with. But they make the assumption that the marketplace back then, which was very simple, persists to this day. But in today's economy, there are a lot of goods which are extremely complex. And so there's factors like long lead times and so forth, and that big companies, capitalists, would not even contemplate going and manufacturing this unless they had some reasonable assurance that that if they did go into this and produce this thing, that that the market will actually buy it. Because if everything is so unstable, you could spend billions and do something, and then the whole world has changed, and it all becomes a white elephant. And so
well,
therefore, they argue to the government, you've got to have a certain degree of planning and stability for us to get into the game.
Okay, well, I have to admit I don't explicitly talk about that. I guess there's so many things that I want to talk about, and I can't really fit them all in. But yeah, that's the nature of business risk. I mean, you might say that the market is irrationally conservative and they're not taking the risks that they really should. Or you could say they're trying to swing things so that there is less risk. Or another interpretation is that business really will take on these risks. It's just trying to, offshore or, basically push the risk onto other parties than themselves, when really they should be operating in the market and accepting those risks. So I guess that is one of the things, and I do observe. I think that there was a place that did Nokia. That was which country is that? That's
Finland.
Finland. I think there is a view that in Finland and Japan you had a certain degree of government coordination of industry, where they had these panels and said, right, this is what we're all going to do. Does everyone agree? And in a sense, that's not the market operating in that naive degree of competition, everybody out there trying things randomly. There's a certain amount of directionality to that. It's being directed, coordinated or even centrally coordinated. But that is one of the things. You centrally coordinate things, and you could say, oh, well, the government's just pandering to vested interests and making stupid decisions. Or it could be that basically a decision that everyone follows is going to work because it's actually coordinated. That's sort of some of the things there. But yeah, that's a bit of rumination off the cuff. So.
Well, then the long term,
Yes,
Nokia hasn't done that well, has it?
This is your question.
Oh well, yeah. Anyway, Nokia's on a downward slide. But anyway, maybe it's world economics which has kicked in.
Well, the question there is basically even a firm that independently arises of its own accord, that some individual says, right, I'm going to secure the financing, I'm going to make this big firm, and it will fly for a while and then it will fold. You could say, in a sense, maybe Nokia had its time, it was a good government decision, but it just saw its course and eventually declined. Or you could argue that basically the government should have never supported in the way they did in the first place. I don't know which one it is.
Economic. Just saying about you were against quantitative easing or something. Didn't you say that?
Keynesian easing or something.
Well, more the Keynesian sentiment.
Well, I mean, it's not, surely it depends on the circumstances. If you're in a deflationary environment, it's good to pump money, isn't it?
Oh, I would agree with that. What I would say is that when the world was embedded in stagflation, running the printing presses weren't going to get you out of that situation. But it may well be that in this particular situation you're talking about, you can get away with running
2008.
Yeah.
It might have, you know, we might have had another Great Depression.
Well, okay. Well, I would say that the way the printing presses were run in decades past, I think there is a problem with that. But it may well be that if there truly is an emergency, maybe you can actually run the printing presses and get away with it. But my understanding of Australian economic history is what started out as an emergency, basically they just ran the printing presses from year to year to year saying, oh, we've got to support employment. That wasn't in the sense of there being an employment crisis, just, oh dear, we don't want employment to fall at all. And that's the difference between basically reacting to a crisis and just basically applying a salve, you know, that everybody just wants even though they don't really need it.
Well, as a socialist, you should agree with that, don't you?
Just let him go.
You're keeping unemployment down?
Let's say my more radical approach is that we should move the world towards full unemployment and should understand the interactions between growth.
Full employment.
Yeah, full unemployment. In other words, none of us do anything, and the robots are doing everything. Now, I forget the name of the Sydney anarchist who did actually say something like, "We are keeping machines out of a job." You know, I forget the gentleman's name. Some people here might know that name. But his sentiment was, now I admit, we have had automation, and the benefit of the automation was grabbed by the capital owners. But if the benefit of automation was actually shared amongst the general population, maybe we would have reached that situation that we all work 1 hour a week. But we didn't go down that path. You know, so when it comes to socialism, you can see I have some very radical ideas. But in terms of pumping out money to keep people employed, no, I don't go down that path. But there are other more radical paths that I'm willing to go down.
Thanks.
Right. Yeah, we've been talking about that automation thing for 250 years since the Industrial Revolution, haven't we? And,
Sabos, sort of the guys throwing their clogs into the machine.
The point I would like to make is when we talk about the GDP, you know, how they measure the gross domestic product. There's a couple of similar little versions here. If a man, or you'll take a man, it could be a partner, whatever, I don't want to be too politically correct, but if a man employs a woman to look after his children and pays her, that's part of the gross domestic product. If he pays his wife the same money to do the same thing, it's not. If a forest fire or bushfire burns down half the town, rebuilding it is part of the gross domestic product, even though it's been burned down. These are kind of inconsistent. Keynes used to talk about a casino economy, and the world, they took off for America with the advent of the Second World War, where they were printing money. You know, admittedly it was a controlled economy in the United States at the time, as it was here during the Second World War, because they could justify it, as it was in Britain at that particular time. But the fact is, you know, that we were printing money. I think the money, the fact is that we got rid of gold is the best thing that happened. You know, and I was going on about the benefits of the European Union. The fact is, you don't have all those different currencies, so you don't need to have gold as a constant currency. You have the euro. You have one currency. You have this one consistent currency. All right, there's problems with it as there was with gold. So basically, with all these inconsistencies, we have to really say it's not science. It isn't philosophy. It's what people anticipate. It's what we choose to believe, and the effort that we choose to put into it, and how we've conned and gold with advertising. And from that point of view, it seems to matter not terribly much whether it's a fundamentalist form of socialism or a fundamentalist form of capitalism. I guess I would have to go for something. Even Churchill says, you know, if you had to go for, you know, you'd have to go to the left rather than the right. And I would agree with him on that. But we have to find a balance somewhere in the middle. You've got to bring all people on board. You know, there's no two.
Well, I suppose I'll jump a little bit ahead, but I think you spoke about, one of the things you spoke about was GDP. Yeah. And yes, that is correct, that basically if we have more security guards, if more people are in hospital getting fixed for injuries, not so much increasing the overall health of society, but basically there's more injuries, so there's more people in hospital, or people are dealing with fires or whatever. Yeah. What you might call negative actions in society count for increased GDP. So that is a problem there. And I would also say that some jobs, like let's say if we're selling tobacco or gambling, you know, we're selling things that basically people are using to harm themselves.
Yeah.